Our next speakers, we have a panel next with three panelists. I would like to invite Angela, Brigitte, and Carole to the podium to hear. And I would like to introduce the moderator, Suzanne. Suzanne Horr is a senior risk manager at the Office of Information and Transformation here at AUB. She has an extensive experience working with organizations from various. She has delivered several workshops, training projects in IT governance, information security, business continuity, identity governance, data privacy, risk management, and IT compliance. And she served as a moderator for several IT, cybersecurity, cybercrime panels. Suzanne holds a master's degree in informatics, and she's currently doing her PhD studies in Portsmouth University in the UK.
No, I have one. Hi, everyone. Hi, ladies. So today we'll be talking about data democratization. So for you to know that anything related to data governance, data security, it's something I love to discuss. So it's a buzzword. We hear a lot of it in digital transformation, in electronic government, and any project related to digital transformation. So I think let's start first with defining data democratization. So let's start with Carole. Carole, would you like?
Thanks. So, quick definition on data democratization coming. I can list these different aspects of data democratization, but in general, it's about giving access to data to support data-driven decision. So that's the heart of data democratization. Now, what does it consist of? It consists of making data accessible and available to everyone. So there is an wide accessibility dimension to it. Elimination of data silos is very important. You know that in the old system, the data is locked among IT units and these guys. So it's about breaking the walls and going beyond. It's about implementing technologies so that data can be accessed, shared, and analyzed. So the whole analysis technology dimension is included in data democratization. It's about empowering the employees beyond the analysis to do data-driven decision. So it's the full chain going all the way to data-driven decision to affect performance of the organization. It's a key element in digital transformation, and it's a very important way to break down traditional hierarchy in organizations, fostering collaboration and innovation, and promoting, most importantly, transparency and accountability. So this is a quick overview.
Yeah, thank you. So Angela, we're discussing the big data. So can you tell us more about the benefits and why do we need data democratization?
Sure. So Carole just mentioned, it provides transparency and accountability. Anyone who wants to access it has access. It reduces corruption, increases transparency. But another important advantage of it is that it improves decision making. So I mentioned about how it helps us improve updating the curriculum to match the job's need, identify what are the trainings in need. But if I were to give an example of another sector, let's say you're sick and you go to the doctor asks you to do a number of tests. This is data for him to understand the symptoms you have, how to treat them. And it's the same if we apply it for labor market. The problem is unemployment. This is a symptom. So why do we have unemployment? And big data helps us understand it because of the dynamism it comes to understand the skills, the gaps in the labor market. It also improves citizen engagement. It helps the government get closer to citizens, understands what are the issues in the local level, and improves this also accountability of the government. It also increases innovation. Entrepreneurs have better access to the latest innovation, can design product and services accordingly if they have access to the latest and more and up-to-date information. It also helps build collaborations and partnership between public and private, between government agencies requiring information that are complementary. So the Ministry of Economy that has information on the firms can collaborate with the Ministry of Labor who has information on the people and help solve this labor market issues. Obviously, other ministries are involved, also agriculture. So this collaboration when it comes to data is truly important. But obviously there are risks, so it's not all
exactly.
rosy.
I think Brigitte discussed or talked about the data silos at a certain point. So maybe you want to elaborate more on this and where to start with the data literacy and how to handle the data, not in a silo way?
I think I spoke enough about silos and my aversion to silos. But one thing that I think a way to not only democratize, but actually show the good picture of what is happening really in the world is something that the late Hans Rosling has done. He had these beautiful bubbles that showed that the world isn't as bad as we all thought. So what Hans Rosling did, and he is one of my champions, is to get the data from all around the world to show that education in Africa is way better than it was 50 years ago, that income in Africa is much more. I mean, people paint the picture that, you know, it is the old stereotype of Africa that everybody's dying of hunger, that everything is bad in Africa, whereas Africa is a vibrant nation of 1.1 billion people that are all dynamic, that are getting educated, examples of Ghana, examples of many other up and coming, and we saw now that Nigeria internet penetration is over 70%. So what Hans Rosling did is brought all that data and actually showed us in no uncertain terms, in beautiful what Samia spoke about the soft data, which is the graphics. He made them into bubbles and he showed us that the world isn't as bad as we feared, that on the contrary, there is so much hope in the world because of so much that has been done so far, despite my dreaded silos. So at least that's what I think. And another good example that, if I may, I could tell you about, I mean, we're part of something called the Lebanese Private Sector Network. And one thing we're doing on June 16th is actually helping what my colleague from the World Bank is doing is actually getting the data on what's happening in the local market. Why is there underemployment and unemployment? Carole is helping us with a digital platform that will actually aggregate the employment creators, the people who are seeking employment, just to know who are actually equipping, skilling, and giving training to match the skills that she talked about with the jobs that are being on offer. And what are the business enablers? We have a number of, for example, now there are no banks. It's very hard to get a salary if you're employed remotely. And there are these digital wallets that now exist. There's digital banking. Who's doing what? When? What are the enablers? I have, for example, what I work in is a company that actually matches people on demand, so professionals on demand. So you can get somebody from Lebanon to do your branding. You're sitting in New Zealand, you just pay them. And this is what's happening. It's like the Fivers and the Upworks of the world. So all of this is happening here. We just don't know what we know. And this is what we're doing on June 16th is something called Lebanon Works. And it's going to be a big deal in the countries to start collecting data on the world of work and on showing who is doing what and to what end. So I think these are two good examples.
Is this something we're gonna hear more about it?
Yes, right now, I mean, we announced it yesterday in Horeca. This is the second time we talk about it. And our champion is Carole, because she's the brain behind the digital platform. We're very lucky to have her with us as a member.
Yeah, indeed. So, Carole, anything else to comment on the risks with the data?
Well, there's the whole story on privacy and security.
Yeah.
So The whole debate on privacy is today very, very big. And
especially with the legal framework.
The privacy issue is becoming very big today. And in some countries, we're really behind in the policies, the legislative framework, and the awareness to manage this. In Lebanon, we have a law that the electronic transaction law that does not protect the data that is managed by the public sector. So you know, the data that you give to the government, you have no rights of protection on it. There is some protection on the health level, and there's some protection on the private sector level. So there's a whole framework to build. There's a regulator to create. There's a whole process to put in place so that this takes place. The security is also very big today. Cyber security is becoming a huge market today, and cyber attacks and all this. So there is a whole science now to protect systems so that they become resistant to attacks. The data governance is another important thing. So here, you have to make sure that people are using the data in the proper way and in a consistent way, and they're respecting the policies and procedure. Who is seeing what, who is doing what with the data is very important. But there's a fourth point. We say garbage in, garbage out. So if you have bad data, it's lost. So it's very important to have good data. And very often we don't have good data. Those who train models, they know a lot of stuff is open source, but you take it, you train your model is crap. So you have to bring these labelers and start to label your own data. So it's very important to have good data. Technical expertise. We talked about upskilling, and so we have to have the knowledge also. We don't always have it, and it's important to develop it.
Okay, and then so if we need to sum up some hints or best practices, where to start? Where to start?
Start from Lebanon.
Yeah, but yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
But where?
Where to start in data democratization? Well, it depends in what context you are. In some contexts, everything has to be done. In some others, it's about fine-tuning and building things. So in Lebanon, there's the whole framework and basis that needs to be built on top of the breaking of the silos. Breaking of the silos is another very interesting thing to develop in Lebanon, because the silos themselves block the governance and the interinstitutional coordination. So this is a big game changer. If we manage to break the silos between the institutions in Lebanon, it's a huge game changer. It's different levels, basically, starting from the foundations to the procedures to the awareness.
And to have a legal framework for this.
Clearly.
Yeah. Would you like to add anything else?
Well, one thing is to help always to zoom out. I mean, what do we want from this data? What is it going to be for? Is it just because we want to employ data scientists, or is it because we want to use whatever we have to inform policy? And I think this is eventually what it's all about. We have been, yesterday in a meeting, I was on a panel in Horr as well, and this is on the food industry in Lebanon. And there was a minister who was present, who was attending throughout the day, and he was lamenting the silos that exist between the Ministry of Industry, the Ministry of Economy and Trade, and the Ministry of Labor, because there is no exchange of information. Nobody even knows their mandates. There are things that are interchangeable. So the silos exist everywhere you look. But then what do we need out of it? Why do we want this data? What my colleague Carole did during the pandemic was something that Lebanon was leading on in the Middle East. It was an amazing thing what they've done with digitizing the data on COVID, and it was a good practice. That in itself is a best practice. At the same time, there are so many things that we need in this country that are, I mean, if we're going to talk about Lebanon, there's so much we need to do, and I think, and I do insist, that part of what we need is data on refugees that exist in the country. Yeah. We're a sovereign country, and we need that data to be shared with us. So,
and
to
we
me,
have
that's
the skills.
Yes.
Yeah, we have the skilled people.
You know, Brigitte, you just brought this memory. During the COVID, we had deployed a system that was coordinating between the different institutions on COVID-related data. So you had the Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Health, the COVID Committee, the Presidency of Council, and the municipalities. And the data was flowing around, so it was being shared and moderated so that it gets consolidated. And there were times where Minister of Interior and Minister of Health were going on TV swearing at each other, but the teams in the two ministries were working together on the system on the same data. One day I was in the airport, I see two desks, one for the Lebanese University, one for the Ministry of Public Health. They were working on the same system, but they didn't talk to each other. So it's very interesting how you see when you bring together the data synergies and the data collaboration and sharing, how you break the political silos and you make things more constructive to a certain extent.
Yes.
For Lebanon, I agree, we need all of those policies, legal frameworks, data protection laws, but we need data. It's incredible how much we lack actual data. The last population, I don't know if anyone knows when the last population census was done. 1932. Since then, population is estimated. There is this fear of data. We need to find a way to address it. Data related to labor force, usually it's done on a quarterly basis because you have seasonality of employment to capture that. The first one was done in 2018, and then there was a follow-up one to the previous one in 2022. Before, there wasn't really any full-fledged labor force survey data as it should be. So there is this, so we have, before democratizing, we need to have it. We need to also build the capacity of people to interpret it, because there's also a lot of misinterpretation of data. A number of times I saw, for example, people confusing economic inactivity, so someone who's not even looking for a job or not staying at home, women, students working, students in the universities, with unemployment data. And they come up by saying 70% is unemployed. No, that's not true. That's not how you interpret the data. So it's important to really build the capacity of data interpretation, avoiding big headlines that are not accurate. So the accuracy of data that Carole was referring to. I think all of these are also important.
I think
a bit bold, but
say it.
The resistance,
I love
the
data.
resistance to collect the data is linked to the opacity. In other words, the more opaque, the less likely to collect the data. So opening up and putting the data out will facilitate and will break a bit the obstacles to collect the data. But there's a real political resistance to data collection now, so that's an important thing to.
There should be a will.
You know, thinking about it, there's another thing we want to maybe think about that. In data democratization, there is something called data commercialization. And there's a big business that's being built now around the world. I know people who left their job in Facebook to develop a company that sells data. So this is becoming big today, to take data, buy data from companies, anonymize them, and sell them back to researchers or to various companies for different purposes. Soon you will have, just like you go and buy your book from Amazon, you will go have a shop where you will go buy your data. As a company or organization, you will be offered to sell your data to serve research, marketing, and other services. This is very interesting. It can be very constructive, but as this kind of culture develops, the urge for framework and legal framework and protection is becoming more and more important. In Lebanon, it's very important to have the framework and the privacy culture awareness go hand in hand with the data development.
Yeah. And there has been a law regarding the data, right? Electronic data. announced in 2018, but I'm not sure if this is really...
That's the law, but it's a law that is not, does not have what it should
on
have.
Papers.
All it has is the protection of health data, and it has some element for the private sector at privacy level, but it's not, what is needed is to create a regulating entity. Today, there is no entity that audits, regulates, provides advice, etc., in relation to privacy. You know, when we did Impact, we were on our own. There was no one to talk to or ask or audit or question the privacy. And here it's interesting because you have the civil society organization who come in and start to audit what's going on. And they can fill the vacuum in the interim. So this is also an important thing, is that civil society start to be more and more active to fill the vacuum until the institutions and the processes are built.
You mean body, something similar to ANISA in Europe, right? I mean a body similar to the one in Europe, like ANISA?
You mean, yeah, I mean a regulating institution like the one, they've got one in Tunis that has been doing a great job. It's an institution that has oversight over everything related to data in the country, and that has the audit capability, and that can, if something goes wrong, they can activate the judicial and the prosecution, and they can take action.
All right. Anything else to add? Yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free. Do we have time?
We can open the floor.
Yeah.
Democratization is a big word. How can you democratize data when you cannot democratize society? What's the cultural element of democracy?
You democratize the data in order to democratize the society.
Do you think this way or the other way around?
I think it's easier with the data than the society.
You cannot bluff them because you have societies now, country regimes that are using data to really survey their citizens.
Yeah, that's another thing.
Yeah.
But why I'm saying this, because my experience is when there is resistance to democratization at political level, then starting to initiate some change at technical level is a very interesting game changer. They don't understand anything at it. So you can go in and start to roll out some solutions, and all of a sudden it's happening. And it can spread, you can trigger some domino effect. So there is something interesting in the whole technology as a change agent when you have, old generation conservative ruling that know nothing about it. It's an interesting game.
I have a question from Angela. Thank you for the lovely presentation, as well as the Brigitte. I think it's the same question. You mentioned about the online job posting, analyzing the big data, adding the labels, and so then you see these are the available jobs, and these are the available labor markets. These are the gaps we can be linked, and then we can say you need the training to fill this gap, and we can talk about the, inform the universities and so. But this is more passive, or I can say is active passive. What about being proactive, which means, have you ever think about analyzing the patent, the online patent, and see that what are the skills that require future by the next 5 years and so?
Yes, actually, a number of countries are doing it already. And analyzing the past can also help you a bit predict the future. So I give an example, for example, on the marketing specialists. They managed to look at patterns previously. But there are a lot of countries, including India, Korea, Singapore, they are analyzing trends to predict future needs. And those trainings are actually called active labor market programs. The passive ones are more related to labor regulations, flexibility, but when we talk about active labor market training programs are a big part of it. Yes, there is a lot of experience, and big data can help you try to estimate what are the future needs, and some countries are actually doing it.
Yeah, because I've run one model on the patent, US patents, and see what are the skills can match to this patent in futures. For example, for the 5 years and 6 years, we're gonna have a big shift. So whatever we see as a data scientist and say there will be shift to maybe space scientists, it will be shift to different things that I would like not to name now, but this is the things that we can share with the universities to be ready, or share with the companies that prepare the resources for the next 5 years, because this level of education will not happen and will not be easy to acquire by the licenses or by some certificates over the couple of months. This is why I thought that you can have two initiatives, one initiative for the current job market and one initiative for the future of the job markets, 5 years, 10 years, because this digital transformation, digital disruptives coming, and it will be a big shift for the market.
I have a further comment. There are 2 countries that are already doing that. My partners are running something called Talent Corp in Malaysia. And Talent Corp, what it does, it starts profiling students from high school before they go into college, so that they can direct them to which colleges and which majors they're best fit for their profiling. So after they do the profile, they also go to the companies, so all the big companies in the country, and they have one conference per year called the Megatrends that is actually I've been there for at least 3 or 4 times. And the megatrends, they bring people from all around the world, from Harvard, from IBM, from everywhere. And they actually project the megatrends. This is the only conference. It is usually held by Kazana. And the Prime Minister and the ministers attended from beginning to finish 2 days straight. They don't leave. So what happens then is that they do like a projection to the future of what are the jobs that are going to be needed in the future. They go back to Talent Corp. Talent Corp will start informing the universities which new things they have to introduce. I mean, they started data science a long way back because they're very progressive. Another country that is doing that, and we met with 2 of them in the Women's Summit that happened, the Global Women's Summit that happened in Sharjah, and the director of the Institute of the Future of Work in Singapore, they're doing an amazing job as well of predicting and projecting. So these 2 countries, I think, as in Southeast Asia, are leaders in that regard. And we try to do the same thing in Abu Dhabi, and we're pitching it now. But it's something that you can form a whole pathway for society, for people to be like, for example, in Abu Dhabi, to give an example, the future of work will definitely entail gallery managers, curators for museums. They're building at least 5 or 6 museums on the island of culture in Al Saadiyat. So, I mean, just imagine that this is what will be the future of work in at least 5 years. They're going to need much more of that. And other things, they have nuclear powers. So now they have Koreans that are training the future nuclear engineers, because they have 3 nuclear power generators, and as well they have the space program. So there are a number of students that are going into the space program. So I think it's not rocket science, it's just that you need to understand and start feeding that data into the policy, as we always say. Thank you for your question. Thanks.
Okay.
I'm here next. Thank you so much for this inspiring, actually, talks. And I just want to highlight on a very important point and that you just mentioned in relation to data interpretation. I would like to look at it from a more holistic approach and look at the skills and how do we equip students and the education system, if I would like to talk about Lebanon specifically or in the region, because the issue is not only with interpreting the data, on analyzing, and not only on digital literacy. We do have this gap, but this comes from the school reaching higher education, and how can we equip teachers in translating these skills to students that would develop with them in the future. I think this point wasn't, it wasn't mentioned, but it's time to rethink about our education from a legal framework and from strategic level with all these changes. taking into consideration the conflicts and the fragile context that we live in. That's it from my side. So.
I very much agree with you. And for example, Saudi Arabia, as part of its vision 2030, they especially have one of the objectives is to improve the data literacy and to make the country a bit more data driven, and not just as part of government and private sector, but also citizens. So they have this initiative to also ensure that anyone can understand and interpret data and not misinterpret it. So there are some countries that are doing those very wide initiatives to improve data literacy among the citizens as well. So I agree, we definitely have to do it as well.
All right. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, everyone. Yes.
Okay, hi. So I basically have two questions. One of them is when we talk about democratizing the data and making it available to everybody, but we didn't talk about the tools that democratize the data analysis and data science in a way. So should data scientists consider them as their friends and collaborators, or as tools that create more competition for them? That's one. And do I say the second question, or I wait for later?
Do we have time?
I mean, we're running out of time, really, because we have virtual speakers joining us online, and we don't want to keep them. So maybe you can discuss, address the questions to the panelists right after, I mean, at a later time. But let's close now. I mean, maybe one of the panelists can address the question that she asked.
Carole, do you want to talk about the tools? Yeah, and yeah, AI tools.
The tools that democratize the data analysis and data science.
Yeah.
Mainly the advanced levels of Power BI, the generative AIs that are able to do a lot of things when required.
So you mean there should be some work at democratization, at democratizing the tools to analyze the data and making them accessible. That's what you mean?
I'm saying that these tools, when they exist, are they considered a competition or a collaboration for professional data scientists?
It's a collaboration.
I think they're tools, right? If there's, they're tools. So I don't think they will replace it. I think it's important to continuously update the skills to know how to use it, to develop them, not just use them, but develop them. I mean, one example is ChatGPT, for example. It is a tool that a lot of people are using. Is it going to replace researcher? I don't think so, because there are limitations to it. You need to know how to use it smartly. You need to know when it's wrong also. And only people can know that.
Yeah, the tools actually make the skills, they force the skills to mutate. ChatGPT has been an interesting change, because now I know in the software industry, the whole development methodology is being changed now. It's being disrupted, and people will not write code anymore very soon. But it doesn't mean there will not be developers. Their role will be something else, will be about conceiving and thinking about the requirements and the whole packaging of the code instead of writing lines of code. So they're not competitions, but they will shift the role of, as those tools develop, they will shift the role of the humans that are using them.
And I think to that, and I know we're running out of time, but one thing I'm kind of burning to say it. I think to remain relevant today in the labor market, we need to continuously learn. Lifelong learning is one of the most important skills that anyone working should have. If you graduate from university, it doesn't mean you stop learning, never, because the attitude of lifelong learning is what employers are looking for.
In your skill list of skills in the slide, in the previous presentation, we had C++, Angular, React, Java, whatever, native. And thinking about it, this is a very good example. ChatGPT has made all these obsolete. So now they are demanded on the market, but in 2-3 years, they will not be demanded on the market anymore. So that's a good example of how tools will shift the need for the skills.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much.